Good afternoon and welcome to Mr. Jon Sharp, who is joining us for this afternoon's 10-minute takeaway with one of his regular updates on COVID versus the insurers. Hello, John.
Hello, Julie. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you in sunny Scotland?
Well, it is sunny at the moment. I also apologise to you and to everybody else. For some reason, I managed to cut myself shaving, which I haven't done for years. So I'm very sorry.
Accidentally managed to terribly cut off your own head.
It's not a giant spot. Anyway, yes, Julie.
Right, the latest on this ongoing saga.
Yeah. Well,
tell us. You said last time there'd be battles ahead in relation to the claims, the business interruption claims, despite the FCA's success. I assume that's still the case.
It certainly is. I hope I've been consistent in this, in saying that, first of all, the FCA's action was correct. No doubt about it, and nothing but praise for what they did. Absolutely. And it did clarify the situation without any shadow of a doubt, and they were, for the most part, successful. However, I think I've been consistent in saying three things all along. There were only a certain number of policies that the court could look at. I mean, both judgments combined, I think they run to 620 pages. And that's just dealing with 27 policies.
Mm.
There were another 52 which were not even considered by the court. So, and as I always say, you need to read your policy wording. Now, it's brought clarity to some people. In particular, those whose policies were looked at. And I think I've said before that there were some winners in the case, primarily the FCA, without shadow of doubt. There were some people who really didn't have too much to worry about, Zurich being the classic example. One of their policies was found to have some cover, but I think the other three they looked at found to have none. Ecclesiastical, they had court found no cover at all. But one of the ones that the court did find to have cover with the Hiscox policies. However, I've also said, and I'll repeat, that that's not the end of the battle, because you've still got to look at these other policies and their specific wordings, many of which have not yet been looked at by the court. Also, there's been an element of misreporting. I think that the newspapers are saying, you can now claim for business interruption. Well, yes, you can, if you've got one of those wordings where the court said there is cover. Okay? But lots of people, the other people who've got the 52 other different types of policies, those haven't even been looked at yet. So this notion that it's now easy, you put your claim in and insurers will pay, is wrong, because they aren't, is the short answer. They will be in some limited cases, but not in others. And the third point I've always stressed is quantum. It's all very well establishing that your policy should respond to the claim that you've made. It's quite another establishing that you've actually lost some money as a result.
Yeah.
Hence, I've been saying for a long time, Julie, you know this, keep your records, keep everything, because it will not be easy. And unfortunately, on the question of quantum and the question of insurers' approach, I regret to say I'm right, because not only are they fighting on quantum, they are now looking at the judgment in some considerable detail. And in particular, the courts basically had a 6-tier scheme, and it revolves around mandatory or non-mandatory closure.
Right. Okay. All of that is unsurprising. So there are real issues then with mandatory closure.
There certainly are, because what the court said was that there's a difference between a business that is effectively forced to close by the government guidance and ones that weren't forced to close. And in the first instance decision, and echoed by the Supreme Court, they looked at these 6 categories in more detail. Now, I think the best thing for me to do next, Julie, is let me read you a statement, and read everyone a statement that Hiscox issued to the market. Now, I think I've said earlier, Hiscox policies, they are due to respond. But let me just read you what Hiscox has been saying in relation to business interruption claims. I'll have to read it because it's their wording. I'd be wrong of me to represent the position any other way.
Understood.
Okay, so bear with me. We wrote to you recently to confirm that on the 15th of January 2021, the Supreme Court issued its judgment in the FCA's business interruption test case. The judgment is complex and contains over 100 pages of legal analysis and guidance. We have now had time to analyse it, and we are writing to you today to share more information about how it may affect your claim. We understand this continues to be a difficult time for businesses. We'd like to thank you. We would like to provide you with information about the judgment to assist in resolving your claim as quickly as possible. Then there's a heading, what the judgment determines. From March 2020, the different UK governments imposed a number of restrictions upon businesses and individuals to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. These restrictions included the Health Protection Coronavirus Business Closure Regulations of 21st of March 2020, the Health Protection Coronavirus Restriction Regulations of March 2020, and subsequent similar regulations. These regulations applied differently to various business types. Under these regulations, some businesses, like non-essential retail, pubs and dine-in restaurants, were mandated to close their premises or cease certain parts of their activities. Other critical services, like grocery stores and pharmacies, were encouraged to stay open. A large number of remaining businesses, including a wide range of activities from manufacturing to professional services and others, were not subject to mandatory closure and were allowed to remain open. The government asked people to work from home if they could reasonably do so, but allowed those who could not do so to go to work. The Supreme Court found that Hiscox policies can provide cover for businesses that were subject to mandatory closure restrictions if those businesses suffered an interruption to their business due to an inability to use their premises as a result of the restrictions above. For those businesses not subject to mandatory closure, the court found that it is unlikely that it would be difficult to demonstrate an inability to use their premises. The court also looked at the regulation requiring the public not to leave home without reasonable excuse, and found that the cases where this regulation would cause a business to have an inability to use its premises are likely to be rare. This means that the businesses who are not subject to mandatory closure, Hiscox policies are unlikely to respond. They then go on to say that every situation is different, etc. But if anyone thought it was going to be a walk in the park, Hiscox policies having been found to have cover, then I'm sorry, and I've said this all along, they were wrong. The reason for that is insurers are angry about this. I'm not going to say whether they're right or wrong, but some of the clauses put in to cover business interruption were put in to cover short-term closures. So the purpose was actually born, unfortunately, out of the troubles we had with Ireland in the 80s and 90s. They were born out of short-term closures because of bomb scares, for example. Or another example would be within a block of offices, one of the buildings close to your offices becomes unstable and unsafe, and they have to evacuate the offices surrounding. That was what they were designed for, not really to cover this type of situation. So as I said before, firstly, there's a number of policies that have not been looked at. Secondly, there has been an element of misreporting. It is not a walking, this is not the new, as someone said to me the other day, it's not the new PPI here. It really isn't. And there are going to be considerable arguments with regard to quantum. Now, I've heard today that Hiscox had about 4,500 claims. Yeah. Now they've paid some of them, but in relation to the rest, or to a good part of them, they've said, "Yeah, well, fine, fair enough. You've got a claim, but what have you lost?" So it is not a walk in the park. Anyone that thinks it is, unfortunately, is barking up the wrong tree. It isn't.
Okay, so as I understand it, COVID is not a plague.
Yes, no, it's not a plague, Julie. We can say this now because just recently, and these cases will come up, we have had a decision in a case called Rockcliffe Hall Limited against Travellers Insurance Company Limited. Now, they had a completely different type of wording, which wasn't considered by the court. Okay. Now, so this case was brought against Travellers Insurance Company Limited over a dispute as to the interpretation of the disease clause extension and whether it would provide cover extended to COVID-19 losses. Okay. Now, Rockcliffe Hall is a 5-star hotel. It's singing and dancing. It's got those spa things where, of course, as you know, it's got saunas, whereas you know you can't take your ice cream in. It's got all those things. So it's a luxury resort. And of course, it had to shut. Yeah, it was mandated to shut. This wasn't one of those that was told, well, you can stay open if you want, and you're told. This was one of those that was shut. So you'd have thought, well, they surely got a claim. But their wording is different. They had cover from their insurers for 34 diseases specifically listed in the policy wording. Insurers said this was a closed and exhaustive list. They weren't going to cover you for anything else.
Yeah.
Now, Rockcliffe said, well, hang on a minute. This list is ambiguous. You know, some of these diseases cover general diseases involving pathogens. And one of these, of course, is the plague. Now, what basically Rockcliffe were trying to say is that the defined diseases could extend to include COVID-19 because they were related or could be argued to be related, or there was some evidence that elements of COVID-19 were included in this general disease, in this list. The judge was not convinced. Justice Cockerell said she applied the ordinary principles of construction in considering what a reasonable reader would have understood the parties to have meant by the language used, and concluded that it would be fanciful in the extreme to believe that a reasonable reader would interpret the term plague in that way. I have a sneaky suspicion she might be right on that. Right, Rockcliffe also asserted that COVID-19 could be associated with a cause, or sorry, the general disease, this could be associated with a general cause COVID-19. Meningitis was mentioned, emphysema was mentioned, as there is evidence that these conditions are associated with COVID-19.
Yeah.
Mrs. Justice Cockerell dismissed this argument as an Alice in Wonderland approach.
Oh, brutal.
Yes, because again, it's a question of reading your policy wording. Wording is, I would have said, clear. And they would have said in that wording, Travellers would have said, these diseases, if you get one of those at your premises, fine, we'll pay. well, that's it. And we won't add any more diseases to that list unless you ask us to. And if you do ask us to, we are likely to charge you an additional premium.
Yeah.
None of that happened. So again, that type of wording was not considered by the court. It has now been considered, and that's the result. I mean, I don't know whether Rockcliffe Hall will appeal. I don't know. But that's what the judge has said, because she has read the policy wording, and she has said that a reasonable man reading that would not think it covered COVID-19 because it wasn't on the list, and two, trying to extend the definition of these diseases to include things like plague, etc., and saying that's COVID is not going to work.
Yeah.
So really, Julie, there we are. That's the latest development. But I just wanted to make it clear to everyone that it's not going to be this is not over. This is not, as some people have portrayed it as, oh, well, you can go ahead and claim. It will depend on your policy wording. There are a number that haven't been looked at by the court. And even if you have got one that where there might be coverage, you're still going to have the quantum argument of what is it you actually lost?
Exactly what you've lost.
Yeah. And many brokers said that at the time. It might have been better publicity-wise for the insurance market to have said, okay, yes, there's cover, but prove it. And the fact is, many businesses adapted very quickly, as did this. What, Julie? We had our first Zoom calls set up within, what, 2-3 days?
Yeah.
What exactly? Now, we did lose some. We would say we lost money. We had to increase our expense, etc. And some policies do specifically cover that. But yeah, there's a difference, and the courts have also made this clear between the loss that you have suffered, or is it a loss that's caused by the downturn in the economy generally? Two things are very different.
Yeah.
Anyway, Julie, I just thought I'd give that little update. I hope that's been useful.
It has indeed. It has been a while since we heard the words, read your policy wording. In fact, January, I think, was the last time that you uttered those.
Yep, I did.
So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Right, thank you very much for the update. And I've no doubt if there's anything else to tell us,
I will update you accordingly. But I just want to make the message clear. This is not over yet. There's a long way to go.
Right.
Thanks, Julie.
Message received and understood. Thanks, Mr. Sharp. Bye-bye.
Take care. See you. Bye.